Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back for another edition of Investor Stories. On this special segment, the experts describe the most important lesson that they've learned and how that has changed the way they invest. This is the special segment called Lessons Learned. On today's special segment, we have Ali Tamaseb of DCVC. Ali, can you tell us a story highlighting a critical lesson that has changed the way you invest?
I think it's the realization that ideas will change. And if you have conviction on a founder, and it's a very strong conviction, I've seen it time and time again that, you look at that company 2 years later and it's a completely different idea. And a lot of times you kind of push yourself out of a deal thinking this might not be a big enough market. And if the founder is amazing, 2 years later, you come back and you hear that pitch again and you realize, the market was 100 times larger than what I thought, because there's this one element that you can add on to it. So basically, I think the lesson for me is, don't get bogged down by these, theoretical calculations of, how big is this TAM or how this market would evolve, or I have a bad taste in this specific market, and just be founder centric that, do I believe this founder can even change the characteristic of a market or not?
Very good. On this special segment, we have Mehta of Unshackled Ventures. Manan, can you tell us a story highlighting a critical lesson that has changed the way you invest?
Yeah, so one of the most profound lessons actually came on follow-on investments, where we ended up putting our largest check as a follow-on investor in a company based on who the lead investors would be, who the lead investors were in the next rounds. Mm-hmm. We stopped having a close relationship with the CEO. We no longer were recipients of anything that informed our knowledge base other than the standard investor updates. And we caught ourselves, unfortunately too late, investing in the signal of who that Series A investor would be. That is a mistake that I think will forever inform how we won't do it, both in the sense of, if we believe, invest earlier, don't wait for that. And if we don't believe that we're getting any information arbitrage or we have any advantage in that investment decision, it may not make sense to make that investment again. We invest early enough where we don't create a bunch of signaling later on. The round was done. But it goes back to what we said. We had a situation where the founder and investor relationship wasn't as strong as we would like it to be. That's okay. But putting good money after bad is a mistake that I think we're all in the venture ecosystem trying to avoid and get better at. But for us, it came down to, were we actually in a position where we knew something more than anybody else because we've been there from the very beginning? And the answer was no.
It's got to be difficult to turn down the pro rata when Sequoia is leading the round.
It is. But look, I think it's important to remind ourselves, even Sequoia is looking for 1 in 10. So they're expecting 9 out of 10 to fail too. So you have to remind yourself, like, Sequoia is a great brand, but even they understand power laws.
On today's special segment, we have Ben Wiener of JumpSpeed. Ben, can you tell us a story highlighting a critical lesson that has changed the way you invest?
Yeah, I've learned so many things. I think one of them, which I love to share because it's so weird, is I really believe that you can learn something from almost anybody. And one of the most important lessons that I learned as an investor was from one of the most horrifying meetings that I've ever had in my professional career. So I was raising money for my current fund, really desperate for any VC, any LP that would be willing to give me cash. And I was introduced to a gentleman, in another country on the telephone, very smart guy. And I would say within, sometimes you're in a meeting and it goes south like really quickly. Within about 12 seconds, he had never met me before. I didn't even know what I did. And he was just the most obnoxious, vulgar. You can't even imagine how terrible this person was. Literally like cursing me out, profanities. I hadn't even started talking yet. And finally I said, like, what's going on? He goes, when I was young, I was arrogant and naive, just like you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, let me ask you a question. Do you have an investment committee in your fund? I said, no, I'm a solo GP. I don't have an investment committee. He says, you're an idiot. Do you write investment memos for your investments? I said, no, I don't. Why would I write memos to myself? Called me a bunch of other, 4-letter words. And he said, listen, I'm hanging up the phone, but I'm telling you one thing. You better get yourself an investment committee and you better start writing memos because it's going to make your work much smarter. And I did that. Like in my current fund, I thought about it and I reached out to a couple VCs who I know in the United States who are some of the most brilliant people. Some of them have been on your podcast. And I had become friendly with them long distance, and they became my investment committee without a vote, without economics. Just, hey, if I write up a memo, will you look at it if I send it to you? And to this day, those people, so to this day, I now write up a memo, full memo on every investment that I'm going to make. I've already decided to do it. But what this man meant was that by knowing that I had to write the memo for these brilliant people, that would trickle into my whole analysis and raise my game. And I'm telling you, Nick, that in this current fund, there are at least 3 investments that I would have made in fund 1 that I pulled back from because I knew I couldn't write the memo. And in my first fund, when I wasn't writing memos, I would have just, made the investment and I would have lost it. So I actually went to that city in this foreign country a couple of years later, and I called a meeting with this guy. And I think he was like astounded that I wanted to meet with him. And he's like, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, I just want to thank you. You changed my life. You changed my investment approach. I think nobody had ever spoken to him that way. Like he was so used to people being nasty back. And it was such a remarkable lesson and meeting. And I said, I'm just full of gratitude for you teaching me this thing that really, changed my game. So I think you can learn from almost anybody, even the most obnoxious random person on the street, may be able to teach you something.
Amazing. Did he pitch you on investing in your fund, Ben?
Of course not. When I met with him, he didn't show up for the meeting. He was like 45 minutes late.
Oh, wow.
And when, I guess I don't want to give away anything, but, completely unapologetic. And then he asked me how I got to that city. And I said I had flown in. And he's like, why didn't you fly on my airline? Because of course he owns an airline, right? And he just needed to tell me that he owned, an airline. I'm like, I'm happy to fly back on your airline. He's like, oh yeah, I'll give you the number. You can buy a ticket.
Wow, what a guy!
What a guy! But he changed my life, and I really am. I'm not saying it to be facetious. I really am grateful to him. No matter how obnoxious he was, he taught me something that is hopefully going to make me and my LPs a lot of money in the future.
Amazing. That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.